Alrighty, so this is a really exciting session well, exciting for me at least, session that I wanted to record this morning, because obviously, as you can see, if you're watching this, I'm joined today by Chris Ellis. Chris is the Managing Director of Ellivate Consulting. And the thing that's particularly exciting for me about this conversation today is we're actually announcing that we're forming a referral partnership with each other, because what Ellivate do and what Chris and his team do is something that I have absolutely seen amongst my client base that is really one of the kind of key differentiators between those businesses that have an aspiration to scale and those that actually pull it off, right? And so, for many of you who will know me, and, you might be watching this because you know me, I specialize in helping small business owners to recruit their first sales professional. But one of the things that I've always been very kind of aware of and conscious of is, when those business owners are wanting to bring that first salesperson on, often as not, what I find is they're hoping that the salesperson will be many things to many people. And they are going to, bring along and create and drive an entire sales ecosystem. And often as not, that's not something that they're able to do. Anyway, with all of that as a backdrop, how you going, Chris?
Good, great. Thank you, James. Thanks for having me. So keen to talk more about things.
Yeah, good. So, I have a scorecard, and when people approach me and say, hey, we want you to recruit a salesperson for us, one of the first things I'll do is say, listen, that's fine. I'm more than happy to have that conversation. But as a preface, can I get you to go and do my scorecard, which has the 16 questions in it? And, and that provides them with a nice kind of insight and a pretty report. But the key thing, of course, that it's looking for is whether or not they've got a robust sales ecosystem in place that's going to ensure that their new sales hire, is optimized and has a high likelihood of success. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, of course, is your space.
That's right. Yeah. So we see really creating the right systems, frameworks, processes for people in sales, marketing, and even customer success as well. So we call them the go-to-market teams. Yep. In really setting them up for success as an organization scales. So it doesn't matter whether you have 4 people in the organization or 400 people, really helping have that ecosystem so that it's repeatable, scalable, and really sets the new hires up for success in an organization.
Yeah, right. Okay, cool. So we find ourselves at an interesting time, right, where that ecosystem, for, if I use that broad term, is probably more relevant today and more able to be built today than perhaps it was, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was, here's your yellow pages, here's your sales presentation, go your hardest. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So how much of what you do is technologically based?
Yeah, so technology certainly drives a lot of what we do. It can help make things more efficient and more effective for teams as well. So there's so many tools out there in the market now that in itself becomes a challenge for organizations. So yeah. I saw a report only a while ago that said, there's over 2,000 different sales tools in the market and 45 categories. So to think about that as an organization or as a founder in a business trying to set up my organization for success, I could be overwhelmed by the technology that there is, but there are some great tools out there to help sales people be more effective and more efficient in what they do. So technology is a big part of what we do, but also, of course, a lot of things come down to the behaviors, just having the right frameworks, operating rhythms, etc., in place in the business as well, which doesn't always need technology to do that. It's about behaviors, capabilities, and competencies of leaders and the team members as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of your own experience in working with founders, business owners who are still in the relatively early stages, the mindset is, yes, I'm a startup, but I'm ready to scale up.
Yeah.
What's your experience been about their mindset and genuine understanding of this thing called sales?
Yeah, well, I think it really depends on the founder in terms of their background and where they've come from. A lot of founders we speak to have got amazing technical knowledge. They've built a fantastic product, but sales isn't the first thing that comes to them. So they're looking for that sales hire to help take their product to market, etc.
Yeah.
So in those cases, they need more support in terms of creating the right systems, the focus, and also the operating rhythm as they hire a salesperson, as well as identifying even the skills and techniques and capabilities that they need from a salesperson coming into their business as well. Yeah. The other group are perhaps those that are less on the technical side, but they're great. They've been great themselves at selling and taking the product to market, and now they're in a challenging situation if they want to repeat that into as they grow their sales team, and they don't know how to replicate what they've been doing themselves. So those are the two different challenges that we see when we speak with founders who've been building the business themselves and now making those early hires into the business.
Right. So walk us through then the fundamental building blocks of having a sound sales ecosystem and structure in place. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So we use like a 12-step framework that we call the operations and enablement pathway. So I describe operations as the most around efficiency. So how do you create efficiency in the way in which your go-to-market teams are operating? Mm-hmm. So that's made up for an area that I call perform through productivity. So that's all about having the right operating rhythm in my business. And what we mean by operating rhythm can be anything from the sales meetings that we have internally to the way in which we're engaging with our peers in the organization as well, through to my day in the life of as a salesperson. So, you know, what are the activities that I'm doing on a daily basis to create success for me? We then look at the sales process itself. So a lot of organizations that we speak to on this early growth journey may not even have a sales process yet. You know, they've not really thought it through and got it documented. It's just naturally occurred. So we help them actually scope the sales process and actually embed a process into their organization that other people coming in can use as they hire them. And then the third part of that perform through productivity is what I call process improvement. So as an organization scales, you need to constantly be looking at your processes and looking at how you can improve them. Complexity is always going to come into it as we start to create more complex contracting, legal processes, anything across that sales process. So process improvement is a really key part as well. Mm-hmm. Second part of operations we call measure and motivate. So again, this is about helping me use data, analytics, and insights to make better actions and informative decisions in what I'm going to do with the business. So under this, we use things like targets and KPIs. Have we got the right targets in place, the right key performance indicators? Or in a lot of organizations these days, we're calling them OKRs as well. So objectives and key results. Reward and recognition. So if we're making a hire and we're bringing in the first salesperson, how are we going to actually incentivize them to be successful in their role? And then the final part of measure and motivate is the data and analytics. So what reporting have I got in place to actually see that my team are doing what I expect them to do? And also that we can identify the levers to turn, the dials to turn to actually make a difference in our performance going forward as well. So all of those things come under the banner that we call operations. And in a lot of organizations, as they're scaling, they're actually making that early operations hire as well into their business to support their sales, their customer success teams to ensure that they're successful. So people may have heard terms like revenue operations or sales operations. In Australia, revenue operations is becoming a bigger term being used at the moment, and having a hire in your organization that can help you build out those 6 elements that I've just spoken about. Yeah. The second part then is enablement. And that's all about the effectiveness of the go-to-market team members and how we can help them be more effective in their roles. So operations is all about efficiency and how can I do things with less time. This is about when I'm in my conversations with customers or in the business, what can I do to be more effective in the way I operate? So one, you spoke earlier about technology. So we've got one of these components is called scale with systems. And that's all about, well, what's the operating model in our business? As our organization scales, what are the different roles, the different people that we need in our business for it to be successful? So spoke about operations, that's a good example. But also, even within my sales team, there's many different roles I could be looking at in terms of that operating model, whether it's SDRs, account executives, BDMs, so the mix between hunters and farmers. So operating model is a key component that we see as setting up a business for success as it scales. Next one is platform and tools. So this is really the different technology and tools and templates that I can use to set my team up for success. And under this, I call out things like CRMs. So one of the challenges that we see with a lot of organizations is that the first thing they do is buy a CRM and implement a CRM into their business, but actually haven't done any of the other things that I've spoken about. And it's the first thing they've done. And then 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line, they go, oh, I've picked the wrong CRM, or I've not embedded any processes into my CRM. It's just a tool that's not being used as effectively as I would like it to be done. So platform and tools we have a lot later in our process, because we believe there's other foundational things you need to put in place quite regularly before you actually pick all the different technology that you're going to leverage and use in your business.
Right.
And then the final part of scale of systems is communication and messaging. So both internally and externally, what's the value prop that we are going to communicate to our customers, and how we're going to align that between our marketing team, our sales team, and our service and customer success teams, so that everyone is on the same page. And also how we're going to drive that alignment between all those teams internally as well. Quite often we see pain points in terms of handover, or in the marketing funnel, leads getting stuck at the MQL to SQL stage, where we haven't been able to move them from the marketing team into the sales team to qualify them and get them into the pipeline, as an example. So again, a really key point around being effective as a business. And then the final part of enablement is all around talented teams. So this is something I know you're passionate about. And when we look at making the right hiring decisions, we need to have really clear competencies and capabilities to understand what skills do we need to bring into the business that are going to help set people up for success, and how we're then going to onboard them into the organization as well. So if we don't know the skills, the capabilities that we want, then are we going to make the right hiring decisions? But also, are we going to be able to onboard them in the right way in terms of upskilling them in the key areas of our organization and what we need for them to be successful? Training programs obviously underpin a lot of this as well, and technology nowadays is going to play a big part in that, in terms of how we communicate and train and upskill people that we've brought into the business, not just as new hires, but even, you know, people who've been in the business 20 years, they can always learn something new. And how do we best upskill them, help them grow and develop in the business? And then the final part, we always have this last. And why? Because we feel like if you get everything else right in the business, this becomes a lot easier. Coaching. So leaders as coaches. So we want leaders to spend as much time as possible coaching, but if they've got nothing to coach people against, then you're not going to get consistency. You're not going to get repeatable, scalable processes in your organization. So we believe that coaching becomes the final key component of everything else that I've spoken about in terms of bedding behaviors, leveraging the training that you've put in place, but helping your team members grow and be successful and be effective in their roles through the coaching that you do as a leader. So that's sort of the 12-step framework in a quick overview. 6 elements of operations and 6 are enablement that really underpin the success of go-to-market teams. And also we see them as the key components of any support function that you build under the operations or enablement banner in an organization as well, to support your go-to-market teams.
Right. Okay. Wow. So here's the thought floating through my head, right? I've been in and around sales now probably for the better part of 30 years. And certainly 30 years ago, there was nowhere near this level of sophistication, right? It was flick through the yellow pages, walk down one side of the street and walk up the other side of the street, kick as many doors off the hinges as you possibly could, charm the receptionist, grab as many business cards off the front desk as you could to stick into your Rolodex so you could show your sales manager that you were actively prospecting, and, always be closing,
yeah.
ABC and all that kind of thing. Hasn't sales come a long way in that time?
It has a hell of a long way. Although a lot of the things you speak about there's still elements of that we're doing by using technology now, whether we're leveraging a tool to identify the leads that we're going to target, but we're just doing it in a much more scientific and what I call an intentional way as well. So rather than that machine gun approach almost of walking down the street and just knocking on doors and all that wasted effort, we can now be so much more targeted with what we're doing by the use of technology and the use of our own knowledge and putting systems, processes, and operating rhythms in place to do this in a much more targeted way. But you're dead right; it's shifted a hell of a long way from where we were, and to keep up with everything that's changing is such a challenge for a sales individual or a founder or leader in a business as well. Which is why we see this as being such a key component, that as soon as you start to bring salespeople into your organization, you also need to think about the support function of the business, because these individuals can help provide the insights and help you set yourselves up for success in what is an ever-evolving industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, because again, if I go back to the very early days of CRM beginning to come out, and in my business back in those days, we used a platform called ACT. Excuse me, ACT. Does that ring any bells for you?
Yes, yeah, I've heard of it, and even in organisations even 15 years ago, Excel spreadsheets that had been turned into like a sample of a CRM and a tracking tool and things like that as well. Yeah.
And of course, the age-old complaint from the more seasoned salespeople was, I haven't got time for doing that. I've got to get out. My job is to be having, kneecap to kneecap conversations with prospects and all that kind of thing. Do you think salespeople today have evolved past that? I mean, what's your experience of their level of comfort of engaging with the various pieces of tech?
Oh, look, I think you're always going to get a mix of the two, but ultimately more and more salespeople are seeing the benefit of the technology. So if I give you an example of a client we're working with at the moment, they've got a lot of tools in this and systems that they're using. So, they're using Salesforce, and to a degree, there's the salespeople are using that really well. But obviously it still takes time to input data and things like that. But over the top of that now, there's things like revenue intelligence tools that you can overlay, and the organization have done that, which automatically just captures all the activities that the sales team are doing and provides insights in terms of how many touches they're taking on a deal. It provides data in terms of if they lose a deal, what is the most likely point that that's going to happen, and how many touches have been or meetings have there been on that that have caused the deal to be lost. And at the same time, for one deals, it's 20, 30, 40 touches, and these are the different mix of touches, even to the point where it will prompt the sales team member, if they've not reached out to an opportunity for a while in their pipeline, to you need to schedule a meeting because we've seen it's not done this for a while. That's the level of technology now, and the sales team see a real benefit from that, because it's no effort on their part. Yes, they're still doing the same behaviors of putting information into the CRM, but now there's tools that sit over the top of that and actually now give them intelligence, data-driven insights that allow them to make the next action. They can see the benefit of that. So that's where we're seeing a real shift in the market over the last few years, and more in terms of how salespeople can see their efforts at doing the right things in their CRM are going to give them additional benefits and come to fruition with the other tools that can sit over the top of that and give them great insights.
Yeah, great. I mean, if anything at all that's going to give you absolute clarity about where's the best use of your time and energy and effort right now, has to be a winner, right?
That's right.
So then the interesting thing about that then is, have you subsequently also seen a change in the nature of people who are successful in selling today?
Yeah, definitely. Salespeople who have a strong process and a strong operating rhythm, I'm sure they've always been successful, but this is really coming to fruition even more today. Now, not all of them can articulate the process that they follow, and that's a challenge sometimes to get that out so you can share it and replicate it and clone it across the organization. But the great salespeople have a really strong operating rhythm and a strong process, and understand how they can leverage the tools that are put in front of them to the best effect. So that's something that we certainly see a lot of when we engage with businesses. And where the organizations are struggling, and the pain point is they're struggling to replicate that. And they're like, oh, if only I could grab Johnny and clone Johnny 10 times over. And it's our job is, when we're working with those organizations, is to identify, well, what is it that the individual is doing and is working well that can be replicated, and we can document so that others can follow that. So that I see as a really big element now in terms of the salespeople that we're bringing into the business, and also the individuals who are using their time effectively, so that 100% driven in terms of the time that they're using. They're not letting any minute of the day pass by not using it in an effective way. Whether that's through their outreach activity that they're doing, the pipeline that they're managing, the identification of their target market, and their territory planning that they're doing as well. There lots of planning and processes going into what they're doing to ensure that they're successful, rather than your original example of going down the street and just knocking on every door. So I used to do door-to-door selling 20 odd years ago myself, and it literally was just knock on every door and play a numbers game. And now we've got to get away from that, because people's time is important to them in terms of our prospects. And also, as salespeople, our time is very important. So we want to make sure that the people we are engaging with see the value in our service or our product that we're offering, and also, more importantly, that we're adding value throughout that conversation and engagement with them as well.
You've actually just reminded me of a little lesson that I gave to a sales manager that reported to me a good number of years ago, and I was the general manager for the business, and we had 21 branches around Sydney, and she and I were co-located in the city, and she wanted her territory to be expanded. She wanted to be pushed into Redfern and Waterloo and Erskineville, etc., etc. Excuse me. And so I grabbed her and said, come outside, come and have a look at this. And we went downstairs and stood out on Pitt Street, and I pointed at a whole range of different buildings, and I said, have you been through every door on every floor in that building? How about that building? How about that building? And of course, she ended up shaking her head all the time and saying, no, I haven't. I said, well, that's what you need to do. I'm not expanding your territory because I want you to go through every door and every floor. That day's gone, right? Because we can go through the door via, the internet or, any range of different. So on that, let's flip that around a little bit. And I'm interested in your perspectives and experiences around the buying journey now. Right, there's lots of talk out there that suggests that buyers today, and yes, they're far more educated, and yes, they've got far more access, to information around who does what and how they do it. And the suggestion is that most people have already kind of progressed through 60% of their decision making before they then want to actually make contact with a representative of an organization. Is that ringing true for you? Are you seeing evidence of that?
Yes, so certainly there's a lot more of that happening. And that's where I see the alignment between marketing, sales, and customer success as being so critical in these go-to-market teams. Because if we can get that value proposition right, and the framing of our messaging right in all of our marketing content that's out there in all different ways, that they're much smarter people than me that get it out in front of the target customers. That is obviously going to help the conversation with a salesperson when that opportunity does take place to engage with a customer. So certainly there is a lot more of that research happening from the customer's perspective before they're going to engage with us as an organization. Turning that on its head, though, that creates a bigger challenge and also a bigger opportunity for us as an organization with our outreach activity from a sales perspective, in terms of how we're going to make sure that our brand is front of mind when that need arises, and through the outreach that we're doing and the conversations that we're having. So again, if we can be really targeted with our outreach, we really know our customer personas and the different people that we do need to speak to in that buying journey, who are the decision makers, and we're getting in front of those, then even if there isn't a need at the moment, when they do come to do that research, we're going to ensure that our brand is front of mind. So there's definitely a lot more collaboration and engagement needed between marketing and sales than there's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that as one of the biggest challenges with organizations that we do engage with, is that misalignment between the two at times.
Yep.
So that is a big opportunity for organizations to fix. And if they can get that right and then enable their teams from an outreach perspective, it's going to help get in front of the right customers at the right time from an engagement perspective. But certainly agree that that buyer's journey has changed a lot, and even more so in the last 18 months with COVID as well. So organizations, I hate the word everyone's using it, but organizations have got to pivot and operate in a different way now when they're looking at the buyer's journey and how they're going to engage.
Okay, great. This may be a how long is a piece of string question, so I'll kind of preface it with that. But if you're able to generalize, what do you think the investment is, the amount is that a business owner is going to need to make to get their, and I'll use that term ecosystem again, their sales ecosystem to an operable level, a level that is sufficiently sophisticated to then actually genuinely be supporting sales operations?
Yeah. Great question. I mean, the cost can be quite minimal with the whole subscription software market and things that we see now, and the fact that a lot of it is tiered in a way that you can start on pretty basic plans just to embed that in your business. The challenge is the time investment to and the investment potentially in people. So, I always say that if you're making 4 sales hires, you should start to think about your first operations hire as an example. So operations resource, that first hire is going to be 100 grand plus as an investment. But by having that dedicated person in your business, they can start to help build that ecosystem out to support your sales teams. So the investment is more of a time one, both from the owner of that business and the leaders in that business in terms of building out what their framework should look like, onboarding the right people into their organization. But in terms of technology as a starting point, if you have a great CRM and one that is either talking to or has the marketing engine built into it, and so you see a lot of organizations this day and age using the HubSpots of this world, etc., that are offering now the complete service. You can be getting that as a pretty good system for a few $1,000s a year. The challenge comes off the back of that is, what else do you want in your business? And this is where also the risk for an organization is, because of the 45 different categories that there are, they go and try and get everything. None of it gets used, and you're spending a lot of money on tools that aren't being utilized. So I always say the starting point is the CRM. And then you can add to that, build on that. Obviously, everything these days has got APIs to integrate it, etc. as well. But the biggest and best investment that you can make to begin with as an organization is the CRM, because if you can capture the right data, you understand who your accounts and your contacts are, and you're starting to get insights and data in terms of what is making your organization successful in terms of winning deals, then that's something that you can replicate and repeat. So that, along with either a built-in or a separate marketing engine that's going to generate leads for you in the business, to me, are the 2 biggest investments that you can make. But they are potentially not significantly expensive if you're using SaaS products that are, monthly fees and can grow as you grow the your database.
Cool, excellent. And obviously, again, just repeating the fact that the target market that I work with is small business owners, generally looking for their first sales hire. It may be their second or third, and because they've hired number 1 and number 2 and it didn't work out, and so now they're recognizing that maybe engaging a professional to screen their future talent is a smart thing to do. So if we take that as a premise, and we're probably talking about a business that's turning somewhere between 750 and 1.2 million a year, how long would an engagement with Ellivate typically take for them, again, to get to that point of, we've got liftoff? Yeah,
great question. So different clients use us in different ways. So we all have 3 different offerings in effect. So one is a consulting offering where we go into the business and work within the business. And that tends to be some of our bigger clients are doing that, where we're spending quite a bit of time in their business. They've already got to a point of scale, and now it's about refining and creating repeatable, scalable processes for them, and also fixing some of the pain points that they've got. For some of the smaller businesses, we use more of an advisory coaching sort of model, where people, use us they want to still do some of the work themselves within the organization, because it's important for them to learn and adapt. And that model tends to be sort of like a 20-hour model that we do, where they can have hours of time with us on an advisory basis. And some of that time can be used to work within their business with them, and other times it's used just to coach or advise them, and they go and implement an action. And a number of our smaller clients are doing that make their first sales hire. So they engage with us, and it's potentially, we'll do a workshop with them to begin with. It's 3 or 4 hours, helps them build out things like a sales playbook. And then the rest of the time is used as advisory and coaching to help them start to embed that learning, or even support them in coaching the first sales hire that they make as well, because they're learning how to run the conversations with the sales hire, because it's not something that they've had to do before, and not something that they see as one of their core skills. Yes. So our model is always about partnering and trying to ensure that the leader or the founder of the business is upskilled as part of the process, so they're not always relying on Ellivate. It's about helping them so that they can go on the journey going forward themselves, right, as well. So I would say for a company of 750 to sort of 1.5 mil, making the first sales hire, we would go down a 20-hour sort of model that can be a mixture of workshops, coaching, and advisory with them.
Fantastic. All right, great. And final question, absolute question without notice. Is there a case study that you're particularly proud of that talks to the impact of the Ellivate work?
Yeah, so we're doing some work with an organization at the moment that I was really excited by, because I spoke with them the other day, and they said that they've never had such a full pipeline off the back of the work that we've done with them. So that to me was music to my ears. Yeah. And they are a much bigger organization in the UK, but they've just set up in the last 2 years in Australia. So an unknown brand here in Australia made their first sales hire a few months ago. And what we did with them was, in effect, this 20-hour model, where we helped increase the capabilities of the founding team here in Australia around their own sales skills, and brought in the onboarding of the sales hire that they made as well. So we've looked at everything for them in terms of their customer persona and who they're targeting. We've looked at the skills that they need to increase in terms of the way they're pitching to customers, right the way through to the sales confidence. So sales isn't their skill set, but they suddenly, through the coaching that we've done, have realized that you don't need to think about sales as being a dirty word. The things they're doing were about building relationships, adding value in their conversations with their customers. And ultimately, it was just having the confidence at the end to ask for the business. So by doing that work with them, they've actually doubled their pipeline. They've never had such a full pipeline, and been raving about the experience to date in terms of thinking about how to reframe the way they go into conversations. And they're a great client as well. I love working with them because they love processes themselves, because of the nature of the business that they're in. So they immediately jump on the things that we do and turn it into the process that's going to work for their business. So really been great at embedding what we've done with them into the business and making it a core component of their daily activities and their operating rhythm as well. So I think for me, that's like a prime example of, just with 20 hours work, what we can do with an organization that can have a huge impact for them.
Fantastic. Well done, mate. That's great. What a great story. So everybody, and I'm reminded here of one of the favorite phrases apparently of Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, right? Who is coined as or attributed as having said, if you've got a problem, make it a procedure, and it won't be a problem, or in this case, a process. So yeah, mate, thanks very much for your time this morning. I really appreciate it. For those of you watching and or listening, I'm really excited to be teaming up with Chris and the team at Ellivate. For anybody who approaches me directly and says, look, I want to recruit a salesperson, one of the first things I am going to ask you to do is to undertake a very simple 16-question scorecard assessment. And that's going to give you some insight into whether or not you really are ready to hire. Because what we find with small businesses is around 40% of their first sales hires fail. And it's not for the reasons that you might think. It's not because the salesperson was a dud, and it's not because the recruiter had no clue what they were doing. Invariably, it's because the ecosystem just did not sustain them sufficiently. And so for those of you who do the scorecard and where, it looks like, yes, you're on the road, but you're not quite there, I'm then going to be very deliberately introducing you to Chris and the team. And, I hope you've heard this morning, Chris clearly knows his stuff. And having Chris work alongside you and his team work alongside of you to get you to that point is something that I just cannot recommend strongly enough. So, mate, thanks very much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Really looking forward to working with you. And if people want to make direct contact with you, though, what's the best way to do that?
LinkedIn. I'm a heavy user on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. We're always posting content on LinkedIn as well, so it's a great way of reaching out.
Yep.
Or otherwise, Chris at ellivateconsulting.com from an email perspective as well.
All right.
But big thanks, James. Love talking with you, and really looking forward to partnering with businesses and partnering with yourself going forward as well.
Good on you. Thank you, mate.
Thank you.